My teachers may not be watching. We love you.
Does anyone know how many chemicals are in a cigarette?
900.
7,000.
16.
Yes, 7,000. There are 7,000 chemicals in one cigarette. Cigarettes have sadly been a part of my family ever since I was born. Most of my father's side smokes, especially my grandpa. He has been smoking cigs since he was a young boy, and now he has been smoking for about 55 years. During this duration of time, he has had 3 open heart surgeries due to smoking. But it doesn't faze him that he is literally killing himself puff by puff. My father, grandma, cousins, and several of my aunts and uncles smoke as well. One day, I questioned my grandpa on his bad habit and trying to convince him to quit. He told me, "Dylan, I've been smoking my whole life. If it hasn't killed me now, then it never will." And I was about 13 at this time, so hearing these words from my grandpa were devastating. Smoking also causes your breathing to become more ragged. That's because scar tissue is building up in a person's throat and lungs. Your entire respiratory system is breaking down because of the smoking habit. The problem with smoking is the cigarette companies could care less if they are harming or even killing their customers. They just care about the money, and that's what's so wrong. And on average, smokers die 13 to 14 years earlier than non-smokers. Plus, cigarette companies intentionally design cigarettes with enough nicotine to create an addiction. And each day, more than 5,000 children are trying smoking, and 3,000 become hooked. Sadly, some of this is due to their parents having the bad habit as well, and them wanting to try to be like their parents.
Yeah.
Therefore, I believe there should be a regulation on either what they put in cigarettes, less harmful chemicals, or not as much nicotine, or really just ban them completely, but that probably won't happen. The solution to this problem and why so many cigarette companies are now losing customers is due to vaping. It's a healthier switch, more cost-friendly, and will help quit smoking altogether for some. And these companies are losing money because some of their customers have made the healthier switch to vaping. That's because e-cigarettes create a vapor rather than a tobacco smoke. They generally deliver less nicotine to users than cigarettes do, essentially helping them quit their bad habits and getting off smoking and vaping altogether. I also had a close call with my grandma because she had been smoking for a long time and developed some disease that built up a ton of fluid in her lungs, and she had to go to the hospital. And she has always had trouble breathing since I was young due to smoking, and for the longest time she had to use a machine if she couldn't get the proper amount of oxygen herself. And the doctor told her that if she didn't quit smoking, she would have an early death. My uncle had a similar incident as well, and the doctor told him the same thing. From that point on, they knew they had to quit. They both turned to vaping. Vaping was fairly new at the time and sketchy to some people. But they started vaping, knowing the risk and knowing that it was unregulated and that the FDA hasn't looked over it much. But eventually, they got my father to try it, and he hated it at first. But he knew that quitting would not only save him money, but his life. It's now been 3 years since my father, grandma, and uncle have smoked a cigarette, and they couldn't be happier. They say they feel healthier and more alive. And the smell from cigarettes is just god-awful. And the smell from the vapes definitely is a lot more pleasing than a cigarette. Especially my grandma, too. She got to the point where she didn't need her breathing machine anymore, which was a huge plus and a sign of improvement. In conclusion, smoking is a very dangerous and deadly habit that should be regulated, because smoking almost took some of my loved ones away from me.